everyone. Welcome to the first day of the 25th year of Founders Day. 25 years is quite an accomplishment, isn't it? You bet. Hey, we've got a lot of great activities again planned for this weekend for the entire family. A lot of variety of activities, so hope you're all able to enjoy more of the activities other than just tonight. And as we get started, I do want to thank Vicki Mallory and our former Mayor Lynn Keek for Founders Day. It was their brainchild 25 years ago to create an annual celebration. Consequently, Founders Day was born honoring our forefathers. And we've been going strong ever since. So thank you, Lynn. Thank you, Vicki. So with the flooding, there's been many location changes with the activities for this weekend. And as you came in over by the gate, many of you picked up a half a sheet of paper with all the location changes. So if you didn't get one before, be sure to get one on your way out. It's a list of, again, of all the location changes. So if you don't get one tonight, or if you know of someone that wants one, they'll be at City Hall tomorrow. They'll be at the Chamber of Commerce office tomorrow. The list will also be online at the city website and also the Chamber of Commerce website. It'll be posted at the Welcome Center. It'll be on the AMU local access channel, and KLGA will also be updating throughout the weekend as well. So, and just basically all, of course, the events tonight are fine. All of the events tomorrow are basically downtown or on State Street. So it's Saturday events. Some of them are going to be down at Veterans Park, and other locations got moved. So again, check that list. But Friday, all the events are scheduled, a good schedule on Friday downtown. So, and then I just want to highlight a couple. The Wild Haven tour that's scheduled for Saturday morning at 10 o'clock, that has been canceled. And then the World Food Festival, which we originally had moved to Veterans Park, that is moved again to the parking lot west of the Methodist Church downtown on Nebraska Street, Nebraska and Moore Street. So last year, I'm not sure how many vendors there were, but we had 300 participants. So this year we've got at least 12 vendors, and we're looking for more than 300 participants to enjoy the food, and there'll be some Latino music down there as well. So it's just going to be a fun-filled weekend. So hope everybody can enjoy that. So we'll start today. We're certainly gathered to present the Distinguished Heritage Award and listen and learn from the voices from the past. So again, just a brief history of the Heritage Award. This was envisioned by Midge Herbst 20 years ago in 2000, Midge Andreessen, in 2004, to create a process to recognize individuals for their commitment and their dedication to Algona. So the nominations are based on the following criteria: service to and offices held in Algona, Kossuth County, the state of Iowa, and actually beyond the state of Iowa. The nominations are from individuals, organizations, and groups, and the award committee is comprised of a member of each of the following organizations, and many of those are represented here tonight. The organizations are AAUW, the Founders Day Committee, the Lions Club, the Morwins Kiwanis Club, the Noon Kiwanis Club, Rotary, and Seroptimus. So thank you very much for all your thoughtful consideration in nominating and electing this individual tonight. So with that, I will introduce Nettie Renshaw, who has more information for us.
Good evening, everyone. I do not like talking in microphones,
Right
You have to swallow it.
There you go.
That's why, yeah, okay. All right, tonight I have the privilege of honoring the Heritage Award nominee. Jane Shea is probably one of the youngest people nominated for the Heritage Award, but she has also provided a great deal of service from high school throughout her adult life. Although she lived in other parts of the United States and other countries for large parts of her life, she's done much to make Algona and Kossuth County proud. Now that she has returned to our community, Jane has volunteered in at least 2 organizations that are very important to Algona and Kossuth County. A little bit about Jane. High school. Jane played tennis 1 year and track 1 year. Bishop Garrigan didn't add girls' sports until her junior year. 4 years of band, chorus, speech, Catholic youth activities. Jane was a class officer her junior year and student body president her senior year. University. Undergraduate, Briarcliff University, Sioux City, Iowa, BA in History and Theology. Catholic University of Louvain, Belgium, MA European Studies. She played softball and basketball for 3 years. Jane was student body president junior and senior years. She attended Catholic retreats. Her junior year, she was a resident assistant and the dorm co-director her senior year. After university, U.S. Naval Academy sponsor, provided a weekend home for midshipmen for 6 years. U.S. Naval Academy Director, Adult Religious Education for midshipmen joining the church, 5 years. U.S. Naval Academy Lector and Eucharistic Minister. Annapolis Environmental Commission, 2 years. Board member, Goodacre Food Hub, Minneapolis, Minnesota, 7 years. Briarcliff University Board of Trustees, 1999 to 2008 and 2021 to the present. Coast Guard Auxiliary, 2002 to 2007. Agricultural Technical Advisory Committee, Animals and Animal Products, U.S. Department of Agriculture, 2000 to 2007. Global Livestock Collaborative Research Support Program, U.S. Agency for International Development, 1995 to 2000. Volunteer activities, 1975 to 1977, summer volunteer for the Holy Rosary Mission in Pine Ridge, South Dakota. 1978, internship for Congressman Berkeley Bedell, Washington, D.C. 1979, JV coach Bishop Garrigan, volunteer. 1979, helped establish a Catholic worker house in Sioux City, which provided a soup kitchen 3 nights a week and a home for single women with children. Present, Algona POW Museum, and also the Kossuth County Community Concert Association. International volunteer work, Holy Spirit Community, Moshi, Tanzania, 1985, 1 month. Network Catholic Social Justice Lobby, 1986, for the summer. Farmer to Farmer, Moscow, in Russia, 1994, 2 weeks. You're going to have to tell me, Jane, if this is right. Legambiente.
Oh, yeah.
Italian Environmental Organization, 2006, for 2 weeks. Sister Water Project in Honduras, 2016, 1 week. Farmer to Farmer, Catholic Relief Service, Rwanda, 2019, for 2 weeks. Sister Water Project, Morongo, Tanzania, 2024, for 1 week. AAUW branch Algona, Iowa is very proud to nominate and distinguish Jane Shea for the Heritage Award. You're welcome. Would you like to say anything?
Briefly. I guess I can just say I have a short attention span, so I move around a lot. I'm glad that my mom could be here today, and of course my dad is deceased, and I just want to say that I grew up in a family where service was important, and my parents were always very involved in the community and with their church, and so I really owe them a lot in terms of teaching me lessons about service, so thank you very much.
Congratulations, Jane. Now it's time for Voices from the Past, and I would like to introduce Jane Nettleton, who will speak of the Voices from the Past, give us a little direction and guidance.
Well, it's really nice to see such a nice group here tonight. You're all very brave because the rest of the cowards will be there on Sunday afternoon at 2 o'clock at the library when we do this one more time. But tonight, on behalf of the Sioux County Genealogical Society and AAUW Algona Branch, we welcome you here to Voices from the Past. And we will be putting you into 4 groups. You're going to be a little small tonight, so that's kind of good. You'll get closer and be able to hear everything. And this is also a night when we don't have to walk very far. So enjoy. There's one thing I want to ask of you. If you look around here, you'll see some people that have been actors many times. They've come from as far as Colorado to be actors. And we are thrilled to have them. But we would love to know of more people that would like to be actors. And so if you have, again, to do that, or you know someone else that does, there's going to be a table over there by the cookies and lemonade afterwards. And please write your name down and any other information so that we can get a hold of you next year. So, any questions? My 4 guides, if you'll come on up. I should say the 4 guides, not my 4 guides.
What a crowd! I can't remember the last time I've seen so many people at one time.
Reminds me of the time in 1916 that we were having an advertisement for a large flour sale at the store. We were bringing a new flour mill to town. Large crowds came, and they were attracted to the spectacle of the flour mill. Surprised to find a little miniature flour mill making flour right inside the window of the store. They were impressed. Flour flowed out of the store. Marketing magic.
Oh gosh, you and your promotions. But I don't think our guests came here to buy flour. In fact, they may not even know that you had a grocery store. Perhaps we should tell them a little bit about our lives.
You're right, Lena. I have to admit. I am Gus Sjogren, and this is my wife, Lena, short for Magdalena. If you guessed the name Sjogren is Swedish, you'd be correct. My father Per Gustaf Sjögren came from Farnebo, Sweden in 1867. He settled first in Clinton, Wisconsin. My mother, Carolina Firm, was also from Farnebo, and she came to America in 1871. Married my father the same year. I was born in 82 and was the oldest child and only son. My oldest sister, Frida, was born in Wisconsin in 84. We moved to a farm in Ramsey Township near Bancroft, Iowa in 1886, where my sister Beta was born. My father passed away in 88 at the age of only 42, leaving my mother with 3 small children and 1 more on the way.
I so admire your mother. Suddenly, she had the weight of the world on her shoulders. Knowing that she would not be able to manage the farm on her own, she built a home in Bancroft and was able to move in a week before little Anna was born. She started a baking business to support her young family. She also became an agent for Haas's Liver Regulator, a German elixir to better the health of the kidneys, liver, and lungs. But then tragedy struck. Anna died of brain fever when she was just 7 months old. Carolina's heart must have been breaking as she buried her infant daughter next to the husband that she had lost almost exactly a year before.
Yes, it was truly a sad time. We carried on the best we could. Frida and I attended school while Mother did her best to support the family. We moved to Algona in 1891, where Mother established a boarding house. That provided a pretty stable income. Well, except for the crook who skipped out on the rent and stole my mother's gold watch and chain. Oh, I wish I could have got my hands on him.
Yes, to steal from a poor widowed mother, such a scoundrel. I hope he got his just deserts. Well, let me tell you a little bit about myself. I too am a first-generation American. While Gus's roots are in Sweden, mine are in Austria-Hungary. Both of my parents, Karl Fertl and Magdalena Fuchs, were born in Oldenburg, Austria. They were married there in 1883 and immigrated to the United States in 1889 with 3 children, the youngest being just 6 months old. They first settled in West Bend, but made several other moves before finally settling permanently in Whittemore. I was their firstborn child in America and was named after my mother. They would eventually have a total of 9 children. My father worked for the Milwaukee Railroad and we lived in a home on the east side of Whittemore. Our family also experienced the loss of a child when my brother Alex, who was 12 years old at the time, died of spinal meningitis in 1905. I was 14 years old when he died, and I still feel the sadness caused by his passing.
You can imagine that money was always tight at our house. To help support the family, I got a full-time job at the age of 13 as a driver and stable boy at the Peterson Livery in Algona. Before long, I started delivering groceries for the Gilmore Grocery Company. After 5 years there, I was hired as a delivery man for the James Patterson Grocery. At the time, newspapers cited my experience by saying, if he doesn't know where everybody in Algona lives, nobody does. I became fascinated during that time with the grocery business.
And I know Frida, your sister, helped out too by working as a cashier at Chrysalis and Herbst. But it wasn't all hard work. I know your family was very active in the Swedish Lutheran Church here in Algona.
Yes, Lena, that is true. Mother often used to host the Luther League and the Lutheran Ladies' Aid Society. Frida was an accomplished singer and pianist and provided music both for services and for other church activities. In fact, her love of music led her to work at the Messing Music Store in downtown Algona for a while. I became very active in the Algona Lodge of Mystic Workers, which was a local fraternal organization. I made some great friends there.
Then your sister Beta became a country school teacher, and she was the first one to get married. Her husband, Ray Watson, was a fine man and worked as a station agent for the railroad at Irvington.
I continued in the grocery business, but had moved up from delivery boy to helping manage the store. I briefly left James Patterson to work for another local establishment, but they soon hired me back to Patterson's at a greatly increased salary.
You were so popular with the kids, I remember. They waited for you to be behind the candy counter, as you were always more generous than the other clerks. It was around this time that the two of us started courting. Gus was so hardworking and was devoted to helping his mother. I liked what I saw. Good husband potential.
I did enjoy your company, but I had much to accomplish before I was ready to settle down. An opportunity came in 1915 when a local merchant decided to get out of the grocery business. I partnered with Oliver Moe, who ran a very successful meat market, and we purchased the Stevenson stock. Our store would be the first in Algona to combine grocery and meat business.
Such an innovation to be able to purchase your groceries and your meat in the same place. Why, it was the talk of the town.
Our store was located on the west side of a building that stood at 21 East State Street, where the vacant Algona Realty building is today. We did some remodeling and installed a large refrigerator and refrigerated counter units that Oliver had purchased in Chicago. Everything looked great when we opened Moe and Sjogren, the quality store, in 1916. I managed the store and Oliver took care of the meat department.
Yes, your store was successful, despite the fact that it was among 8 grocery stores in Algona. I guess it was beneficial that you were good at promotion. It took a lot of effort to stand out.
We did our best, but it seems like there were always obstacles to overcome. We had to end delivery service during the flu epidemic of 1918. Then the Depression left us with many unpaid accounts, but we couldn't let our customers go hungry. The 2 world wars were challenging, shortage of workers and supplies, rationing, worry, and personal loss.
Yes, during World War I, Frida's husband, whose name was Chris Kane, a local pharmacist, was serving with the Medical Corps at Camp Hancock near Augusta, Georgia. The two were married on September 10th, 1918, while he was home on leave. Shortly after he returned to Georgia, he contracted influenza. Pneumonia soon set in. Frida rushed to be at his side, but by the time she arrived, he had already died. Poor Frida was heartbroken, a widow after 32 days.
Although the store took up most of my time, 1920 brought the game of golf to the area, which I thoroughly enjoyed.
And in 1921, we were finally married after 8 years of courtship. I didn't think you were ever going to pop the question. We went on to raise 3 sons, Richard and our twins, Don and Dean. The next few years, we were a busy family indeed. With school, band, paper routes, and church activities, we were always on the go.
I began to encounter some health issues in the late 20s. I had some back issues which doctors thought were caused by the high arches in my feet. They broke both of the arches, but that only ended up making everything worse. Standing and walking became difficult. not good for a grocer. I was unable to work for a long time. Although I sought additional help at the Mayo Clinic, I ended up using a cane for the remainder of my life.
The store was remodeled on occasion and to keep up with the changing times. You were always looking for something to get customers in the door. You remember when Joe Jensen conducted a painting studio in the front window? He painted local scenes such as the old mill, which attracted a lot of attention.
In 1941, Oliver turned 75 and decided it was time for him to retire. I had been going through a rough patch and had not been able to work for 8 months, and he was unable to continue on his own. In February of 1940, there had been a fire in Barry's Recreation next door, which caused a lot of smoke damage to the inventory. Luckily, we had insurance, but I was unable to be of much help during that cleanup. We sold the store to Vincent Kleinpeter of Wesley.
At age 59, I know you were not ready to retire, and you quickly decided to build a suburban grocery store at the corner of North and Jones Street. I know you were hoping that one or more of the boys would join you to carry on the business. Dick was able to help for a while after his graduation, but World War II was heating up and duty called. He would soon be stationed in North Africa. Oh, that was a worrisome time for us.
I have to say that I really enjoyed running that neighborhood grocery store with Dick. The twins were still in high school, but helped in the store when they had free time. But they enlisted in the Navy shortly after their graduation in 1943. They made trips to Japan, China, and the Philippines during their service. Dick was discharged in October of 45 and came back to help run the store. Don would join us in 46. Dean married and went into the refrigeration business in California.
We were lucky to have some of our grandchildren nearby. Don's children, Brenda, Carla, and John. They brought so much joy and were the light of our lives. We loved to spoil them. Unfortunately, I did not have much time to spend with them. What I thought were gallbladder issues turned out to be cancer, and I passed away July 19th, 1956.
Life was sure different after you were gone. I continued to live in our house next to the store with Dick and worked with the boys at the store as much as I could. I passed quietly from this life on March 13th, 1965, shortly after enjoying my favorite treat, an ice cream drumstick.
The boys continued to operate the store after your death. They suffered through 2 separate fires, one an attic fire in 1965 and one that gutted the entire store in 1966. They rebuilt and the store operated until 1975, ending 60 years of grocery store service to Algona by the Pilgrim family.
Well, actually, Lena, if you count the years that I worked in the grocery business before I had my own store, it was 75 years of Sjogren's in the grocery business.
We love
being
a
part of it.
Algona.
Okay.
Yes, we did. Well, thank you for reminiscing with us tonight.
About the churches in Algona, I think that Jane Nettleton is just so good in all the information she can gather about our history. This one is about the Congregational Church, designed and constructed in 1886 by Abram Wolf for $9,700. The Congregational UCC Church stands on the corner of McGregor and Moore. The New England Congregational style building is the oldest church still standing in Algona. The high-beam dark wooden ceiling and woodwork, mostly handmade, are still strikingly beautiful. The wonderful acoustics and sloping floor for easy viewing made it a popular venue for musical events and public meetings.
The church and the parlor to the west were often filled to overflowing at such times. Jane Addams spoke about her Hull House project at this church. A very gifted black pianist named Blind Boone had a concert in this church in the late 1800s. The first minister was Father Chauncey Taylor, about whom you will hear more as you walk around the cemetery if you haven't already. Well-known women in the congregation were Ruth Suckow, a prominent writer and daughter of a later minister whose book Country People has just been reissued, Margaret Durant, the poet laureate of Iowa during her lifetime, and Harriet Taylor, the daughter of Father Taylor, who helped start the choir and was the first editor of the Algona Bee, a local newspaper.
My name is Father Chauncey Taylor, and you've heard of me and my daughter Harriet before in the Voices of the Past. Harriet Taylor, well, I won't challenge you to remember. This time I have a very sad tale to tell you. I'm telling it in the section of the cemetery set aside for soldiers, all right? This portion right here, the James Taylor Post of the Grand Army Republic, made this all happen. And any soldier from Algona could be buried here free of charge. And if any of you have had to pay for a funeral of late, in this day and age, is that a good sum of money, right? We know that. I was commissioned, now all these words are the words of Chauncey Taylor. I was commissioned by the American Home Missionary Society to come to Iowa to preach to the souls there. On my way in the spring of 1856, I met J.W. Moore, some of you might know that name from our Algona history, and David King. I met them on the way to Boone to get supplies, and they persuaded me to come back with them to Algona. I preached to 23 people at the Moore Bachelor Cabin. As time went on, I preached in cabins near the Black Cat Creek and around Cresco and Irvington. The next summer, my wife, my daughter Harriet, my sons George and James, and I arrived and lived in the cabin I had built, the 5th cabin to be built in Algona. I loved education and also became the county superintendent of schools, which meant traveling to all the little schools in the county, many of them in rough cabins with rowdy students in charge. Such poor excuses for education. In 1860, James and I took the exam that enabled us to teach school classes in Algona. Then in 1861, when the Civil War broke out, James, with our Vermont and New York background and sense of ideals, wanted to fight for the Union Army and the abolition of slavery. I didn't want James to go, as my son George was already in Colorado, and I wanted him to be able to help me with the work of education and spreading the gospel. James just couldn't stay home when 6 other young men from Algona were enlisting. Like the rest of his Eagle pals, he enlisted on August 19th of 1861, was sent to St. Louis as a member of Company F, the 2nd Iowa Cavalry. He was 19 years old at the time. There, James contracted the measles and died on January 22nd, 1862. In memory of James and in recognition of my great sadness, the James C. Taylor Grand Army Republic Post, number 165, was organized in Algona. It was May 4, 1883. And that post is responsible for this section of the cemetery. and any soldier from Algona can be buried here free. Okay? John Rebuff was the fourth child of Michael and Mary Rebuff. You have or will have heard about his family during another stop out there. Their land was just east of the Skank holding on what is now called the River Road. When Fort Sumter was attacked in April of 1861 in South Carolina, none of us in Iowa heard about it right away. Without a railroad connection or a telegraph, we were oblivious, although the political situation of the time made us wonder what would happen to our dear land. Most of the farmers, like the Rebuffs, were more concerned about planting their crops. Then Frank Rist, R-I-S-T, Rist, arrived on the stagecoach in late April and gave us the news. It seemed our country would soon be split in two forever if we didn't stop the southern states immediately. John caught the war fever along with 6 others from around here. When the news of the Union loss at the First Battle of Bull Run on July 21 reached us, they felt they had to enlist immediately. As you know, John's father, Michael, had been a soldier, so he was willing for John to go. His own mother was dead and there were older brothers to farm, so there wasn't much holding him back. He enlisted on August 9th and part of the 2nd Iowa Cavalry, even before enlistees were ever paid any sum of money. Our 7 other Algonans were sent to Benton Barracks, the site of the St. Louis Fairgrounds, under the command of a General John Fremont, commander of the Western Department of War. There were only 5 buildings originally at that site, but some of our boys helped construct barracks, warehouses, cavalry stables, parade grounds, and a military hospital. Soon, there were some 30,000 soldiers stationed at that site. So many people soon caused disease among the ranks, and the hospital was not nearly finished enough to handle the sick. John caught the measles and died on January 4, 1862. His grave lies in the National Union Cemetery in St. Louis. Even though his family could not bring John's body back home, a funeral was held for him at the Skank Schoolhouse, which still stands on the River Road. The sermon was preached by a Reverend McComb on February 9th of 1862. Those assembled were in grief not only for the Rebuffs, because they had just recently heard of the deaths of a Jim and John Ahinger, an Algona family at that time. Levi Carey, another of the first enlistees, was also dying. When someone asked if the mourners were sit together, another replied, "Who here is not a mourner?" It was a sad day that was not soon forgotten. John Ahlinger's story was a little different. He was born in Germany and was a friend of August Zoltan, one of the earlier settlers around Algona. In fact, I think it is Zoltan's shed that is still found out at Call State Park. That is true, and it's fun. I take 5th graders out there and ask them, why couldn't this have been somebody's home? So they're looking in the little windows and they're trying to find something. And always somebody comes up with it. It has no chimney. Okay? You could not have a home if you didn't have a chimney, right? And that's always fun to have a 5th grader be able to come up with that. Levi Carey enlisted with the 2 Johns and James. He lived northeast of Algona, and his father raised hogs. Usually they won prizes at the Kossuth County Fair. That's a little aside there by Mr. Taylor. When the boys got to go to St. Louis, they were set to work more barracks and other buildings. but they also spent a lot of time training to be soldiers. Most of them were farm boys with no idea of what it was to fight a war. Their other charge was to protect the dams and locks along the Mississippi and Missouri rivers. It was probably good for them to get out of the barracks and see some of the country along those two big rivers. I'm sure they couldn't help but think that one of the rivers pouring into the Mississippi was our own Des Moines River, which, if you've been following the floods throughout Iowa, have we been lucky here in Algona so far? Very lucky. All right. By the time Levi's unit became part of the 14th Infantry, they set out for the Dakota Territory. He was too sick to go with them. In fact, he died in February 1862 and was buried in the National Cemetery in St. Louis. 3 other Algona young men also enlisted on August 9th, and their stories are quite different. They were J.C. Heckard, 2 Cresco young men, and Charles Kellogg and his brother Elias. They all survived the war, but you'll have to come back here another year to hear the rest of the story. So even back in his day, you know, he had a sense of humor. Okay? Remember now, the guy writing this book, we're in the 1800s when this was written. The last soldier who died within the year was David Holcomb. He saw more of actual fighting than the other men who enlisted for the Union from our area about the same time. He went to Webster City to join the 16th Infantry and was wounded at the Battle of Pittsburgh on the Tennessee River. That battle is also called the Battle of Shiloh. You Civil War buffs in the crowd certainly know that battle was devastating to both sides, with the most lives lost for the Union, over 13,000 deaths, and for the Confederates, 11,000 deaths. So in one battle, 24,000 young men lost their lives. Remember the mini ball? Used to be back in those days in 1800, all the balls were perfect circles. They could do damage, but they couldn't penetrate bone. All right? So they weren't like killing instruments, so to speak. The mini ball was invented in 1846 in the country of France, and it was introduced during the Crimean War. It was conical in shape and caused more devastating injuries because it could penetrate bone and crush it rather than going around the bone. At the time David was injured, a surgeon general was about to be appointed. Before he organized the ambulance and modern care system used all the way through World War II, there were no real ambulances nor medical treatment system for the wounded. Some of the wounded at the first major battle, Manassas, lay out in the fields for 3 days. Here you are wounded laying on the ground, and no one's coming to help you. Anyway, David managed to walk out of the woods and get to some of the Union wagons that were filling with the injured. He recounted in letters to his family the awful cries and moans he heard in his wagon. The wounded were taken back behind the lines. They had their wounds wrapped with whatever bandages they could find. And at first, David thought his arm could be saved. In fact, he wrote his sweetheart in Algona that he might even come home to recuperate. Sadly, that was not to be. Infection set in. After the battle was over, he was taken to Savannah, Tennessee, later to Cincinnati, and that's where he ended up. But he didn't remember most of the journey. His loved ones heard that he was put on a boat at some time, but he was delirious by then. The Union won the battle, and one of the famous Confederate generals and Albert Sidney Johnson was killed. That didn't mean much to David and his family by that time. Most people now realize that it'd be a much longer and bloodier war than anyone had thought possible. David died on May 17, 1862, of the wounds he had encountered. This quote from the Pioneer Press on Saturday of June 14, 1862, expressed well the sentiments of the community upon the passing of David Holcomb, the last of the Brave Five. Quote, "But no one after another was taken away until now the last one is gone. We know that the cold sods which were placed by strange and careless hands over them have shut out from the world as brave and true hearts as were ever sacrificed on the altar of our country." Thank you for recalling with me the fate. Now this is the words of Chauncey Taylor. Thank you for recalling with me the fate of my son and 4 others of Algona's history here tonight.
Okay, I thought I'd give you an opportunity to sit down as I told you about the second oldest church in Algona, which is it's still standing. It's the St. Thomas Episcopal Church on Paul Street. Until it was built, the services were held at the GAR Hall on State Street, and later at the Adventist Hall.
I'm sorry, which church?
St. Thomas Episcopal.
Okay.
Mr. T.F. Bowen, who was the lay reader of the church, felt that it was time for a church of their own. A committee was formed and land was purchased from John Hecker. The cornerstone was laid on September 23, 1890 by Bishop Perry when he visited Algona to elevate Mr. Bowen to the diaconate and confirm a large class of believers. Services were held for the first time at the new church on February 8, 1891, and for the next few years there was a steady gain in membership. A school church was established with Mrs. Gertrude and L.M. Clark as teachers. A guild was formed. No records remained of the activities of the school or the guild, but it is known that a yearly festival was held at the old armory and that summer picnics were enjoyed at the Gilbert farm. In 1941, the old porch was enclosed and 2 rooms and a more churchly entrance were constructed. The old brown paint was replaced by a glistening white. In 1947, more repairs were made and the interior redecorated. The impressive wooden eagle which tops the lectern will be remembered by many students of Guild Preschool in the late 60s and 70s. In 1950, an undercroft or basement was built and a kitchen, dining room, and heating plant were installed. A new cornerstone was added to the old in an impressive dedication service on May 18, 1952. I've been a member of the church since 1974, and unfortunately, with all the rain we've had, the basement has flooded out twice, so we had to remove all the cabinets, all the cupboards, all the carpet, all the sheetrock, so we're down to the block wall, and the block wall is moving in. So now we're in the process of how do we stabilize that. So it's been a sad event for us, but we'll keep going.
I am Michael Reboff, and I'm proud to say that I'm one of the earliest settlers in this area and one of the most prolific family men as well.
You can say that again.
Maybe I should start over and introduce my dear wife Amelia. I was born in Hanover, Germany in 1807, and at that time Hanover was an English territory. So, being a strong and tall young man, I was conscripted into the English Army and served for 7 years. When I could, as soon as I could, I immigrated with my first wife, Mary Jobman, and our 2 children to the United States in 1833. I was 26 years old. My Army training won me a job as an engineer. at the salt works in Westmoreland County in Pennsylvania. After 5 years of working there, I heard about opportunities buying land near Dubuque. So my family and I moved to a small rented farm 5 miles from Dubuque. In 2 years, we were able to make a claim in the county, which after 10 years, I ended up owning 220 acres. We also had a total of 6 children by then. In 1845, Mary died, but I kept my family together with the help of my oldest children, my 5-year-old, my 3-year-old, and the youngest 2 twins, while Henry, a strong 14-year-old, helped me work the farm.
And that was when I entered the picture. I was born in Dumfries, Scotland, April 9th, 1830, and came to the United States with my family when I was 14. Now, does anyone know what makes Dumfries, Scotland so famous and important?
Murders?
No, it was the home of the poet laureate of Scotland, Roby Burns, a wonderful man. And every New Year's Eve we hear one of his most famous poems, Auld Lang Syne, put to music. Well, when we came to the United States, we first settled in Rhode Island, but we too were attracted to the land beyond the Mississippi and moved to Dubuque County. And it was there that I met Michael and his family. Oy, it was a fiery match, a German and a Scot, but we made it work.
I'll say we did. We had our first child within a year, and 13 more followed. 3 sets of twins.
2 sets in 2 years, and at least 2 years apart.
Then in 1856, we sold out and moved to Kossuth County, settling on the northern half of Section 24. Before long, I had 30 acres under cultivation, the rest being covered with native timber. Eventually, I owned the 160 acres in Portland Township.
We were a part of the Black Cat community, along with the bachelors William Ingham, Andrew Seeley, William S. Campbell, and 2 others in that cabin. The Moore brothers in another, John James Cabin, his near neighbor Jonathan Callender, and the Skank family, not too far from them. The grand Victorian house the Skanks later built on their land still stands today. We even had a school when Caroline Ingham had one dug into the side of a hill along the Black Cat and called it Gopher College. We had some high old times there, the most well-known being the rescue of the Johnson family during our first winter on the Black Cat, the bitter winter of 1856.
There was a settlement about 55 miles north of us at Tuttle Lake. In the fall, Calvin Tuttle and his son George set out for Fort Dodge to get supplies. He got the supplies and came back as far as the Black Cat. When the first of many storms arrived, he ended up there, stuck right there in our cabin for quite a spell. He ended up staying at our cabin among others, but the 2 wagons he had were lost under 15 feet of snow and ice. On good days, the men of the area would go out in search of the wagons. And finally in January, after days of running long poles down under the snow, they discovered the wagons. Tuttle was overjoyed and dug a small well down to one of the supply wagons, which included a large amount of the liquor that kept us warm in the days that followed.
Well, while we were having a jolly time, supplies at Tuttle Lake were running out. Finally, Mr. Johnson, who had arrived late in the autumn with his family of a wife and 3 children, one an infant. Not enough supplies for our winter. A normal winter, yes, but not this one. He realized he had to get to the settlements down south and thought that he could make it in 5 days, or 3 days. Took enough supplies for 5. Well, he hitched up his sleigh, loaded up the family, and it soon became plain that the crust on the snow was too thin to hold the sleigh and the oxen, so he started shoveling ahead of them.
He was shoveling ahead of the oxen to make them move. He did this for 6 days. By this time, the supplies were exhausted. He had only gotten as far as the Seneca area, and his only hope was to leave the sleigh covered and bid farewell to his family and walked many miles for help. Of course, the bright sunlight on the snow eventually blinded him, and he wandered aimlessly for many hours until he heard the barking of a dog and found the James cabin.
Our son, Peter, age 16, John James, George Tuttle, and others started organizing a relief party, and I started baking bread and other things they'd need. Meanwhile, Horace Skank became so concerned about the little family freezing in the snow, he walked the 3 miles to Ingham's because he knew he was the most experienced woodsman among us and could move quickly with a lighter load. Ingham had just returned that very day from battling the snow all the way from Fort Dodge. But he turned to William S. Campbell, who was staying at the bachelor cabin at the time, and said, "Well, what do you think?" Campbell replied, "If you go, I shall go with you."
And they quickly set off. Ben Reed has this recorded in a detailed account of the rescue in the history of Kossuth County. Suffice to say that they were near death when Ingham and Campbell found them, and that the rescuers and the Johnsons had severe cases of frostbite. But finally, they all arrived at the safety of the Black Cat neighborhood. The Johnsons stayed with the Skanks the rest of the winter. Obviously, our cabin would have been too overcrowded.
That is true. Sadly, we lost 2 sons during the Civil War, John and Henry, one to a war injury and another to disease. 2 of our little girls, Grace and Capitola from last, died fairly early, but 8 of the 10 living survived and even got married. Frank, who was born in 1867, continued to farm our land when we retired. He married Minnie Seeley of another pioneering family. Mikey became a charter member of the Presbyterian Church. He died in 92, one of the oldest settlers in the county. His obituary stated he was upright, honest, worthy of great respect, and beloved by all who knew him.
And my wife, Amelia, being a young woman when I first met her, died in 1907 at the home of our daughter, Mrs. J.B. Winkle. She had come for a visit and died the next day. Again, her death brought back so many memories of the pioneer days in the Black Cat area and tributes to her as one of the early pioneers. You think our story is over? But we have many descendants living in this area. Among them, another rebuff with an unusual story. Agnes and Clarence will tell us that story next.
I was born in 1899, so I never knew my grandfather Michael. I did know my grandmother Amelia. I was the oldest of Frank's family, so I grew up on the family farm, which my father improved greatly over the years, developing it into one of the finest farms in this part of the state. My mother was Minnie Seeley, the daughter of Andrew Seeley and his wife Alice Benscooter Seeley, so another pioneer family from the Plum Creek area. I guess it received a double amount of their spirit of adventure.
I certainly did as well, although my family of Dows came to Kossuth County from Wisconsin later. My grandfather Herman eventually moved to Arkansas and sold his farm to my father. It is still visible on Highway 169 and was later included to be Miller's Used Clothing. Everybody knows where Miller's Used Clothing was across from Smith Lake out there, correct? That was my farm. I was sort of considered the black sheep of the family because I loved being a vagabond. Even as a teenager, walking or hitching wagon rides back to Wisconsin, where my father was born.
I was 4 years younger than Clarence, but we did grow up in the same neighborhood. Even though he mostly dressed in overalls and was not overly interested on his appearance, I found him fascinating with his stories of the North Woods. I looked forward to his return from Wisconsin each year at sheep shearing time. He would find work at that, a hot and oily job, and then help his family with the summer chores. When apple picking was over, Clarence would return to Wisconsin, and I would dream about him until the next summer.
Agnes's parents weren't happy about her attraction to me, but she was very insistent about marrying me and moving to Wisconsin. Finally, they agreed, and we set out our new life together. Even in the mid-20s, farming was a hard lot, especially in northwestern Wisconsin. Our small farm did not yield a lot, and the house had a dirt floor, and I never was a very good provider for my family.
Don't say Clarence. You worked hard and so did I. We We had 6 children and dearly loved them. Later, we did get the rest of our farm back. In 1939, however, disaster came to us.
Agnes was in the kitchen baking bread, and our oldest Mary was taking care of the youngest. The rest of them were with me in the field a quarter of a mile away from our home. For some reason, there was a bottle of kerosene near the stove. Even though we were afraid of fires back then, just like everybody else was. The bottle exploded. Agnes was instantly horribly burned. Mary came running to the field with Bruce. We all dashed to the house that was not on fire. We saw scorch marks in the grass where Agnes had rolled trying to extinguish the flames. I found her lying on the ground by the water tank. I left Mary in charge and took Agnes to the hospital in Frederick, but she was beyond saving when we arrived. Agnes was only 40 when she died.
Neighbors wanted to divide up the family, but Clarence wouldn't hear of it. Mary took care of the younger ones, but everyone had to pitch in. Clarence taught Harold, the oldest boy, to cut all the boys' hair, although they got lots of ribbing about the styles. Ray, the second youngest, learned to patch his own paints and was very protective of Bruce.
Some of you here may remember Ray. He came back to Algona with his wife Joyce Bosley Dow and lived on the Brown Dairy Farm south of Algona. Ray walked from there every day to the Pioneer Production Plant north of the Four Corners and loved fishing and cross-country skiing. He and Joyce had 2 kids, Perry and Zoe, where they were very active in the Trinity Lutheran Church. Now we're going to let you go on that happier note, and thank you for letting us teach you about Algona's history.
Can I just give the last story about the 3rd oldest church in Algona? The current First United Methodist Church on the corner of Moore, Nebraska is the 3rd oldest church building still standing. It was built in 1898, 1899, and was copied from one of the Sterling, Illinois, from one in Sterling, Illinois. It is actually the 2nd church built for this church body. The first church was built in the 1880s, and in less than 20 years, the membership outgrew the building. The exterior stone for this church was shipped from Lake Superior and cut on site. Originally, the roof was slate, but it was replaced in 1984. It was built in the chateau-esque style, combining Gothic and Renaissance elements. The stained glass windows are a coordinated design and presented to the church by Mrs. S.G.A. Lizzie Reed in memory of her husband, Dr. Reed. She was the first editor of the Upper Des Moines newspaper and worked for both temperance and suffragist causes. The windows were purchased for $700 and are found throughout the church on both floors. The bell tower has its original red roof and the original bell. There were several other lovely old churches built in Algona, but they were later torn down to make way for progress and replaced in other locations in town in the second half of the 20th century.
I want to welcome you here today to the Hutchins family section of Riverview Cemetery. I am Eugene Hutchins, but you can call me Gene. Although I am not buried here, I spent my entire life here in Algona and have a great love for the community. I have come back to visit today to share not only my story, but that of my family, which dates back to some of the earliest days of the area. In fact, our family roots go back to colonial days when John Hutchins, the first of the Hutchins line to come to America, arrived in Newbury, Massachusetts in 1638. My brother Paul was the family genealogist. This is his final resting place, and as you can see, he went so far as to design a unique gravestone which sets out some of our family genealogy, especially the 4 generations that lived and settled here in Algona. It's right over there. My great-grandfather, Dexter H. Hutchins, was born in Franklin County, New York in 1823. He was reared on a farm and went to district schools. In his early 20s, he spent 2 years in Indiana, but returned to New York and continued to farm in the summer and taught school in the winter. In May of 1848, he married Helen Whitney, a neighbor and schoolmate. Their first son, Clayton, my grandfather, was born the next year. Dexter contracted gold fever, and in the spring of 1852, he and his brother and several neighbors went to California by vessel around South America. The voyage took 5 months. That's one way, 5 months. When he first arrived, he engaged in mining, and he and his brother soon found that more money could be made by feeding the miners, so they hunted ducks and geese to supply the Stockton market. After 2 years, he returned to his wife and son in New York. That fall, the family began their journey west. They traveled by prairie schooner and by boat on the Great Lakes from New York to Chicago and on to Clayton County, Iowa. The trip took 18 days. Dexter acquired a farm near McGregor where he would farm until 1862. In September of that year, at the age of 39, he enlisted as a private in Company E, 27th Regiment, Iowa Volunteer Infantry. By this time, the family had lost an infant son, Marshall, and added 2 daughters. Lucina was 2, and Celia was 8 months old. Clayton became the man of the house at the age of 13, helping his mother run the farm in his father's absence. Dexter steadily climbed the ranks of reaching 2nd lieutenant by the end of the war. He participated in many battles, including Pleasant Hill and Nashville. He was discharged in May of 1865 while he was hospitalized in Natchez, Mississippi. After recovering, he returned to Clayton County, where his family anxiously awaited. After farming for several more years in Clayton County, the family began their move to Kossuth County in March of 1869, again by prairie schooner. The deep snow they encountered made the travel difficult, and it took 8 days, a sled, and rerouting to reach their destination. Once settled in, Dexter embarked in the implement trade. Over the years, he acquired several hundred acres of land and became vice president of the Algona State Bank. He served as Kossuth County supervisor during the construction of the courthouse in 1872 and had charge and oversight in its construction. In 1869, he built the first brick business building in town and one time owned 7 houses in Algona, 5 of which he built. He was a proud member of the GAR and attended his regimental reunions whenever he could. He died on August 8, 1915 at the age of 91, just before my 5th birthday. I remember him as a dignified, respected man. Clayton, my grandfather, was 20 years old when his family came to Kossuth County. He later attended the University of Iowa at Iowa City for 2 years, but was unable to complete his education due to losses sustained from the grasshopper infestation of the 1870s. He went on to teach school at various places, but it was while he was teaching in National, Iowa, that he met my grandmother, Ava Hamilton. They married on Christmas Day, 1877, and settled in Algona. They had 7 sons, 2 of whom, Ernest, the oldest, and Homer, the youngest, died in infancy. Ava died at the age of 34, leaving my grandfather alone with 5 young boys, the youngest 3. A year after her death, Clayton married Mrs. Fanny Hamilton of McGregor, herself a widow with a daughter. The role of stepmother can be very difficult, but Fanny devoted herself to the care of those motherless young boys. She showered them with love and kindness, and her happy disposition once again brought cheerfulness to the household. She was greatly missed not only by her family, but the whole community when she passed away in November of 1915. Clayton's first public service was as surveyor of Kossuth County for 10 years, and then he served as county auditor. He served for 9 years as Kossuth County drainage engineer before being elected to represent his district in the state legislature. He was an effective legislator and became an authority on taxation. His expertise was sought out for years after he left office. But unfortunately, pneumonia brought on by a cold took his life in 1931 at the age of 82. My father Harold was born on the Hutchins farm in Irvington Township, southeast of Algona, on March 7, 1881. He attended Algona High School, graduated from Grinnell College, and attended Harvard for 1 year. He married my mother, Alice Minkler, in 1907, and they lived for a time in Dubuque, Wisconsin, before returning to the Hutchins farm, which he operated until 1929. My parents then moved into Algona, where, in addition to selling insurance, he became the secretary-treasurer of the National Farm Loan Association, which was later renamed the Federal Land Bank Association of Algona. This was not a salaried position, but my father had always been a promoter of cooperative farm movements, and he found it a good way to assist area farmers through the Depression. What started as an organization of a dozen Kossuth County farmers grew through the Depression and recovery into one of the county's major financial organizations, serving many area farmers. I went to work there after college, and when Dad retired in 1945, I assumed the management position. I had been born in 1910 while my folks were in Dubuque. I received my education through the Algona Public Schools and was a general engineering honor graduate from Iowa State College in 1932. I married Irene Dalziel in 1937, and we had 3 sons, Dave, Richard, and Robert. They kept us busy. I served as a Scout Cub Master for 14 years, and we were all active in the First Congregational Church. Music was a big part of my life. Not only did I sing in the church choir for many years, but one of the joys was performing with the area barbershoppers. Algona was a busy growing community in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, and I was happy to be involved. Over the years, I served on the Algona City Council, the Algona School Board of Education, and the Good Samaritan Center Health Care Review. Perhaps one of the things I am most proud of, though, is my service as General Chairman of the 1954 Kossuth County Centennial. It has been termed the biggest celebration to have ever taken place in the history of the county, attracting a crowd of estimated 25 to 40,000 people. It is hard to believe that it happened 70 years ago. You know, I was not the first choice for the general chairmanship. Eugene Murtaugh was named general chairman at the organizational meeting held in February of 1953, but unfortunately, he was forced to resign several months later due to work responsibilities. I was chosen to replace him in August of '53. What an undertaking it was. It soon became clear that any extra time I had for the next year would be devoted to centennial plans. That fall, I was up for re-election for city councilman at large, and it didn't take long to decide not to run again. Of course, I did not plan the celebration alone. There were 33 members on the General Planning Committee and over 45 subcommittees. Each township in the county had its own committee. There were groups for finance, public safety, concessions, publicity, historic displays, on and on. It took thousands of volunteers working day in and day out for over a year to put on the celebration that we envisioned. The school alumni committee spent months tracking down graduates from the area and sending out letters of invitation. The Kossuth County Centennial Review, written by Esther Sigsby, alone had a cast of over 350 that practiced for weeks in advance of the big show. The highlight of the entire event was the parade. From end to end, it stretched 4 miles and lasted 2.5 hours. Area high school marching bands and calliopes filled the air with music. Horses, cars, tractors, and steam engines pulled floats, some magnificently decorated, transporting local young ladies with action such as square dancing and a dog on a treadmill running a washing machine. There were buggies, bicycles, and baby carriages. There were stagecoaches, Shriners, and saddle clubs. From the Tama Indians representing the Native Americans who once roamed this area to the American Legion float depicting the flag raising on Iwo Jima, a panorama of our history unfolded. One unscheduled event did occur during the celebration which recalled earlier days, a buffalo hunt. A few head of buffalo were brought in for the celebration, and a young cow buffalo escaped her pen on the northeast corner of the fairgrounds and wandered into a cornfield on the Pioneer Hybrid Experimental Farm. After several attempts by a National Guard jeep to capture the wayward animal, the Algona Bit and Spur Club was called in, and they managed to round her up. I continued to serve the community in any way that I could. I was active and the member of the Noon Kiwanis Club and Isaac Walton League. In '59, I was humbled and honored to be the first recipient of the Algona Community Service Award. By the way, I was also a part of the Quasqui Centennial Celebration in '79, but this time just on a planning committee. My career with Federal Land Bank Association lasted 42 years. I was looking forward to a long retirement, not only to spend more time with my family, but on another passion of mine, gardening. But that was not to be. After an illness of several months, I passed away at the age of 71 in 1982. I donated my body to the University of Iowa for research, and the cremains are buried in Iowa City. I am thankful that I was able to spend my life in a community that I loved and that supported generations of my family. The fact that I can contribute to its success was frosting on the cake. And I heard a rumor that the Cassuth County Historical Society will be showing movies of centennial events continuously at the Wells Fargo building this weekend. What a great way to share the memories of that event. Be sure to stop by, grab a bag of popcorn, and settle in for a treat. Thank you very much.